The Republic is a Platonic dialogue written around 375 BC and is one of the greatest achievements in Western philosophy. In this video, we'll talk about the fourth book in the Republic. The fourth book continues the argument which was made in the end of the third book, that the rulers should not be allowed to own private property, otherwise they would work for their own gain rather than for the good of the people. Adeimantus points out that being a ruler sounds unpleasant this way. Since the ruler has no private wealth, he can never take a trip, keep a mistress, or do the things that people think make them happy. Socrates responds by reminding his friends that their goal in building this city is not to make any one group happy at the expense of any other group, but to make the city as a whole as happy as it can be. We cannot provide the guardians with the sort of happiness that would make them something other than guardians. He compares this case to the building of a statue. He says, suppose that we were painting a statue and someone came up to us and said, why do you not put the most beautiful colors on the most beautiful parts of the body? The eyes ought to be purple, but you have made them black. To him we might fairly answer, you would not surely have us beautify the eyes to such a degree that they are no longer eyes. Consider rather whether, by giving this and the other features their due proportion, we make the whole beautiful. And so I say to you, do not compel us to assign to the guardians a sort of happiness which will make them anything but guardians. On the statue, as in the city, we must deal with each part appropriately in order to make the situation best for the whole. Socrates proceeds to address several topics regarding the lifestyle of the guardians. He tells the money-loving Adeimantus that there will be no wealth or poverty at all in the city, since there will be no money. Adeimantus objects that a city without money cannot defend itself against invaders, but Socrates reminds Adeimantus that our city will have the best warriors and points out that any neighboring city would be happy to come to our aid if we promised them all the spoils of war. Socrates limits the size of the city, warning against it becoming so large that it can no longer be governed well under the current system. He suggests that guardians guard their own elementary education above all else, and that they share everything in common among them, including wives and children. He declares that the just city has no use for laws. If the education of guardians proceeds as planned, then guardians will be in a position to decide any points of policy that arise. Everything we think of as a matter of law can be left to the judgment of the properly educated rulers. Socrates then declares this just city complete. Since this city has been created to be the best city possible, we can be sure that it has all the virtues. In order to define these virtues, all we need to do is look into our city and identify them. So we will now look for each of the four virtues: wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. We find wisdom first. Wisdom lies with the guardians because of their knowledge of how this city should be run. If the guardians were not ruling, if it were a democracy, their virtue would not translate into the virtue of the city. But since they are in charge, their wisdom becomes the city's virtue. Courage lies with the auxiliaries. It is only their courage that counts as a virtue of the city, because they are the ones who must fight for the city. A courageous farmer or even ruler would do the city no good. Moderation and justice, in contrast to wisdom and courage, are spread out over the whole city. Moderation is identified with the agreement over who should rule the city, and justice is its complement, the principle of specialization, the law that all do the job to which they are best suited. So now we have reached one of our two aims, at least partially. We have identified justice on a citywide level, and our next task is to see if there is an analogous virtue in the case of the individual. Justice in the individual, as in the city, involves the correct power relationship among parts, with each part occupying its appropriate role. In the individual, the parts are not classes of society. Instead, they are aspects of the soul or sources of desire. In order to make the case that individual justice parallels political justice, Socrates must claim that there are precisely three parts of the soul. By cataloguing the various human desires, he identifies a rational part of the soul that lusts after truth, a spirited part of the soul that lusts after honor, and an appetitive part of the soul that lusts after everything else, including food, sex, drink, and especially money. These three parts of the soul correspond to the three classes in the just society. The appetite or money loving part is the aspect of the soul most prominent among the producing class. The spirit or honor loving part is most prominent among the auxiliaries, and reason or the knowledge loving part is dominant in the guardians. Just relations between the three parts of the soul mirror just relations among the classes of society. In a just person, the rational part of the soul rules the other parts, with the spirited part acting as helper to keep the appetitive in line. Compare this to the city where the truth-loving guardians rule, with the honor-loving auxiliaries acting as their helpers to keep the money-loving producers in line. What it means for one part of the soul to rule the others is for the entire soul to pursue the desires of that part. In a soul ruled by spirit, for instance, the entire soul aims at achieving honor. In a soul ruled by appetite, the entire soul aims at fulfilling these appetites, whether these be for food, sex, drink, fine material goods, or hoards of wealth. In a just soul, the soul is geared entirely toward fulfilling whatever knowledge loving and desires reason produces. Socrates has now completely fulfilled his first goal. He has identified justice on both the political and individual levels. Yet, in giving an account of justice, he has deviated from our intuitive notions of what this virtue is. We tend to think of justice as a set of actions, yet Socrates claims that justice is really a result of the structure of the soul. After identifying individual justice, he demonstrates that a person whose soul is in the right arrangement will behave according to the intuitive norms of justice. He needs to show that the notion of justice we have just arrived at is not counter to our intuitions, that this notion accounts for our intuitions and explains them. Socrates points out that since our just person is ruled by a love of truth, he will not be in the grips of lust, greed, or desire for honor. Because of this, Socrates claims, we can rest assured that he will never steal, betray friends or his city, commit adultery, disrespect his parents, violate an oath or agreement, neglect the gods, or commit any other acts commonly considered unjust. His strong love of truth weakens urges that might lead to vice. Socrates then concludes the fourth book by asserting that justice amounts to the health of the soul. A just soul is a soul with its parts arranged appropriately and is, thus, a healthy soul. An unjust soul, by contrast, is an unhealthy soul. Given this fact, we are now in a position to at least suspect that it pays to be just. After all, we already admitted that health is something desirable in itself. So if justice is the health of the soul, then it too should be desirable. Plato feels that he is not ready just yet to make the argument in favor of the justice's worth. He puts off the definitive proofs until the ninth book in the Republic series. There are a total of 10 books. So this was kind of a summary of the fourth book in the Republic series of 10 books. And in this individual series, I mainly summarize the books in the Republic. When we're done with this, I might make a separate video about some of the key concepts in the 10 books in the Republic and give my own views on them. Maybe I might do that. Anyway, this is it for the fourth book in the Republic. I'll see you in the next video in which we'll discuss about we'll discuss the fifth book in the Republic.